Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
So, number 130, what a milestone.
I suppose it is really.
Is it?
Seems like a lot.
Anyway, we're at Liabi, which is amazing because it's been closed, of course, over the period of COVID and everything, as Scargill was, the other place where we haven't been here for, I think, 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And we've had a fantastic group here.
Oh, we have.
A very varied group of people who seem to be real searchers after truth, I would say, with all sorts of some getting along fine, others with problems and obstacles and
survivors, as so many of us are.
Yeah,
it has been lovely. I mean, Liabi is in such an extraordinary position because it's the end of nowhere, isn't it? You think you've got there, but no, you haven't. And you go across something called the Valley of the Rocks if you've never been. And finally, you come to this house on the edge of nowhere looking out over the sea. And I think for a lot of people who come, that's how it feels. They can leave behind the rest of the world.
Yeah. One very strange thing is that when I wrote, those who've read a book I wrote called The Shadow Doctor, and particularly the second one, will know that at one point three of the characters meet on a bench looking out over the sea in a Christian conference centre. And when I arrived here this week, I looked through the window and I thought, that's where Doc and Marion and whatever her other name was,
yes.
That's where they sat. And then I thought, no, that's not history, that's fiction. But these characters get into your head. I suppose it's because of the time since then, and I've been so certainly into that second book when I was writing. But anyway, it's been really, really good to be here. It
has, and what is interesting, I just said, Adrian, that people come to get away from the world, but I think this has been a week where the world, or one person in the world anyway, has come up trumps. And that is Dottie Weir. And I don't know what his faith is. Somebody will probably let me know. But that is not what's important on this occasion. I mean, he stood for everything good. Well, you tell me in case I get it wrong.
He's a Scottish footballer, Scottish rugby union player.
He is.
And I remember him particularly, not through what he looks like from the old days, but the commentator, who I think was also Scottish, used to say, "And now Dottie Weir has taken the ball." And it was always so exciting when Dottie Weir got the ball. So I knew him as a highly active, energetic, wonderful rugby player. And now, of course, he's just died. This terrible disease,
MND,
hasn't he? Yeah.
and campaigned tirelessly for it. But that's one side. But what we heard after his death was the thing that really warmed me. As soon as he heard of somebody going down with the horrible news that they got motor neuron, which is in a way a bit like the Valley of the Rocks to nowhere, isn't it? There's no retreat possible. Yeah. There's no cure. On the whole, everybody knows how it will end.
There's one form of it that I think ends with a sort of plateauing. A friend of ours was in that situation, but yes, it's a long-term death sentence, really. Yeah.
And what we heard was that immediately he was in there with words of encouragement and hope. It was pretty good stuff, wasn't it? By contrast, you saw, not that this does represent the Christianity that we try to be part of, but you saw something awful on the news, didn't you? Where a news
I thought it was awful. I don't know. Maybe some people who talk about what they believe would think it was a very good thing. I think it was a newscaster, and someone had come up behind this person with a sign and held it up. Now, I want to be careful because I can't remember exactly what the wording is, but it was something like, follow Jesus or believe in Jesus, don't go to hell. And I thought, why have you done that? Why have you decided to start from the darkness, to start from the negative? We spend our lives, have spent our lives for the last 40 years trying to find ways to express one of the most famous verses in the Bible, which is God so loved the world.
Exactly.
This is the root, the platform, whatever metaphor you like to say. It is the platform for all other things. It is about a person. It is not about a system or a philosophy.
No.
It is not about someone wagging his finger censoriously at people in order to frighten them into submission.
That man might have been very, very genuine, we don't know, and really believing that would save people. I just felt, and I know you did, the contrast between a very large man who wears tartan trousers, or trews as the thing they are, and with a smile on his face from the beginning to the end, so weak at the end, but still going on and on, giving hope. And coming into people's lives with a little bit of light and I suppose this is one of the reasons we picked up on it, a lot of laughter.
I suppose it shows the danger of shortcuts, doesn't it, apart from anything else? I mean, Dottie Weir has been working on this for years now, in order to raise money and to raise awareness, and he's maintained his demeanour, his cheerfulness. Obviously, he has... he must have had terrible times. But his family, I think 3 boys, his wife, have been with him in this, and he's just a ray of light. Now, coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking through one of the larger towns near where we live, and there was a man preaching.
Oh, not another difficult
very good
story.
As far as this is concerned. Well, I'll tell you one of the sentences he used, right? He was shouting very loudly, right? Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you want to shout loudly, that's your privilege. Right. But one of the sentences he used was, you can only assuage your sin with using the blood of Christ, right? And I thought about 1/500th of the people around here will have the foggiest, faintest idea what you're talking about. And it was delivered in an aggressive tone, and I have done similar things before, and I would again. I was going to go up to him and say, why don't you just tell people that they are loved, not that they've got to prepare themselves for disaster, because in the end, everything I've ever done, this is only me, I mean, everything I've ever done that is of any real use has been motivated by someone caring about me, encouraging me, loving
absolutely.
me. And I think it's the same for you.
Of course it is. And for most people we meet, there will be a person in their story, even if their story has been difficult, who will have encouraged them, and not just encouraged them, but seen the potential for taking a situation that everybody else would say, this is just awful, just bleak, just dark, just nightmarish, and look for the hope within it, the smile that can still happen, and what that means to people when they are specialed by somebody who they know is going through an enormous amount.
It's never simple, this business of expressing what you believe, or wanting people to understand where you're coming from. I mean, Dottie Weir did it very well. I always remember, as I know you do, the 2 ladies in the slums in Bangladesh.
Aha, there's a nice challenge.
So they'd have complicated the lives of both those people we mentioned. Because, we start from the fact that they were taking young girls off the street.
Little
girls who, because of the poverty in that area, in the slums there in Hazaribagh, were likely to perhaps either die or move into prostitution. We heard the story of one little girl who it's too horrible.
I think people know the stories that happen to little street children, boys and girls actually, but this particular project was for little girls.
And just tell people what they did, because they took them off the street, didn't they? What happened?
Well, I mean, one of the things when we knew we were going to this project that had puzzled us was that there was a picture, and underneath it was the caption, "Look at this little girl in her nice dress," and she looked like a very nice little girl. And we'd walk through the streets and seen children with horrible sores, and anybody who's been to these streets will know, horribly dirty clothes and ragged. I mean, even the hair looked ragged and filthy. So when we arrived at this project, we almost thought we'd gone to the wrong place, didn't we? Because when we went in, there were lots of little girls, all looking very clean, with clean hair, wearing a nice little dress.
Did they all have blue dresses, or am I
No,
imagining
they
that?
didn't.
They
But no, it wasn't a uniform. They were quite pretty dresses, little girls' dresses.
And they all had a shower, didn't they?
They did. I mean, the idea was to teach these little girls what it was to be normal.
And
And
that's what they said, wasn't it?
yeah.
That their main aim was to teach little girls who knew nothing about love or care
yeah.
what it might mean to be, in some sense, as others saw it, normal. Yeah.
So they washed their
Very
hair
normal.
when they arrived, they had a shower, and they put on the pretty dress, and then during the day they did all sorts of things. I mean, music and painting, and I'm sure a level of education. And then do you remember, we'll come back to the two ladies in a
we'll come
minute,
back
but
to that,
do you remember one of the things that rather horrified us was to hear that they then took off the nice dress, put on their old clothes, and went back onto the street for
That's right.
the night.
Yeah. They weren't able to stay there, were they?
They didn't stay there, but then we were told that if they had taken the pretty dress onto the street, it would have basically been ripped off them and sold. But the main thing was that each day they were given hope and light in the form of being clean, having their hair brushed, putting on the pretty dress, and doing things that were lovely and wholesome and normal.
And they actually put on a little show for us, didn't they?
They
With
did, yes.
all sorts of things, singing and playing
They did.
instruments.
They did.
And
They did.
I remember one of them asked if they'd done enough, and we didn't really know what she meant. But I think these places were very poor, and we were representing a charity that could help places like that.
Well, that's right. That's why we were there.
It was great to be able to say we will talk to people about you, and we'll obviously see what can be done.
And who was doing this? Who was bringing the light and the hope into these little
Well,
girls? This is where the challenge
wonderfully
comes.
complicated bit of the story, because one was undoubtedly a Christian with Orthodox Christian belief.
Yes, she was.
The other was undoubtedly a Muslim
Yes,
who had her own set of Orthodox beliefs.
yes.
But somewhere in the very difficult and unremitting challenge
Yeah,
of rescuing small girls from terrible fates,
yeah.
they seem to have lost a bit of memory
Yeah.
about what was motivating them.
Yeah. Well, what divided them, maybe. What they
divided them.
didn't have in common.
Yeah.
But then we saw it, didn't we? I mean, we saw it all the way through the pandemic. We saw people putting aside their personal beliefs to take love to people who were stranded in hospital, possibly dying in hospital. We shouldn't be surprised, but I think sometimes we forget that we can learn, not just from other faiths, but from people of no faith.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I was thinking the other day that things like mental health, sometimes the church is lagging behind the world in a way. I mean, there's a tremendous emphasis on talking about mental health, on talking about struggles and depression. There's programs that are aimed to sort of tackle suicide. But still in some churches, there's remnants of a feeling that mental illness has a stigma that might be evil, might, if it isn't healed straight away, I mean, I think it's changing. But we can learn from the world sometimes.
It hasn't changed enough. I mean, I heard from someone just recently that his experience in a church context was that mental health problems were regarded as spiritual problems. They were evidence that your spirit had either gone wrong, or that you'd made wrong decisions. And I thank God now, and I really mean thank God, we're beginning to understand that a broken leg or an illness, physical illness, and mental illnesses are have to be sorted in the
and
same
illnesses
same
of the
way.
brain,
Yeah.
like motor neuron disease and like Alzheimer's, they are also coming to the fore to be talked about, to be understood, that they're not funny old people who've got dementia. Or, I don't know, I can't really explain, but it's really important, isn't it? And exciting in a way.
It would be interesting to know, wouldn't it, what if Jesus had a publicity manager who was accompanying him and was supposed to be advising him, what he'd have thought. Because some things he would have said,
Don't do
that's
that.
good. No, but some things he'd have said, that's good. I mean, he meets the woman with the son who's died.
Yeah,
And-
that would be okay.
And the words we read are, his heart went out to her. And that's, for me, is the centre of what attracts me to that person. Not the theology of it, but the kindness coupled with something very strange that I don't understand, but certainly the kindness. But on other occasions, he would stand in front of very important people and say some very nasty things to them, which they found extremely offensive.
Yes, it worries me a bit sometimes that I don't think I do challenge things enough. I mean, do I march? Do I challenge if I think governments and leaders have got it wrong? One of the nice things this week at Liabi was simply praying for King Charles. And because we were looking at a prayer in a psalm, weren't we, which was a prayer for King Solomon, wishing him to be not just wise, but to tackle injustice, to stand up for the poor, all the things that you could then read that Jesus stood up in the synagogue after being tempted in the desert and said this, and read from Isaiah, this is why I've come to bring down the powerful, to support the poor, to set the captive free. And we do need to pray for our leaders instead of just being, well, I'm not piddled off with King Charles. I'm not sure how he feels about being king.
I think
but certainly some leaders, you just
yeah.
find yourself feeling grumpy about them instead of thinking, I really need to pray for him today.
There were one or two really good prayers, I thought, and I think he's always wanted to be good, hasn't he, Charles? He's always wanted to do good and be good, and he's come onto the throne very late in his life.
Yeah.
And I really do wish him well. I do hope it works for him. It's at this particular time in the context of this country, it's a very, very difficult role to...
Well, it did challenge me. Am I praying for my leaders? In parts of the country, in Scotland, who are you praying for? What do you want from your heart? What would Jesus want? What would God want? And we always come down to kindness and to bringing hope and bringing light and bringing understanding and listening.
Yeah.
Instead of starting, as I know I sometimes do, from thinking, oh, for goodness sake, before somebody's even said anything.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think there's lots of challenges around, but thank you, Dottie Weir, because he's really challenged me this week.
Wonderful.
And I think people are truly, truly sad.
And if you're a rugby lover, and I was, because it was one of the only things I was any good at, I loved it so much. It was a sweet thing to me, and his name was a part of that.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. I was thinking also, talking about Jesus, of the changing the water into wine, and that would have gone down well, wouldn't it? I mean,
that would have been all right.
As a publicity thing, although clearly he didn't particularly want to do it at that time, but...
Somebody was saying to me the other day, now this is interesting, do you think that Mary, when he was 17, said, surely you're old enough to start now, hung on for 17 years after he was born and knowing he was the Son of God at the age of 18, 19, 20. I mean, I don't know, but it is possible that when he says to his mum, my time has not yet come, whether she looked at him and saw a slightly different look in his eye to think.
That is not my view, but I found it a very interesting one. But my view is that she knew what he was capable of.
Oh, she knew what he was capable
and had
of.
seen him doing things before.
Oh, okay.
Because when they said, we've got no wine, and she said, he said, my time is not yet. Then she said to him, they haven't got any wine. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but this isn't the time I'm going to do this.
Okay.
And he didn't even answer him, apparently, and turned to them and said, just do whatever he says.
Yeah.
Because she knew, because she'd seen it, that there was a magic here with a small m that would work miracles in people's lives.
And
not
she
just
knew he would care
changing water into wine
about this couple.
but changing people.
Yeah.
Changing people.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
And we haven't mentioned the World Cup, which I think is great.
It is very good indeed, yeah. And we are all wishing, praying, hoping.
Well, that's another story.
To see England win on Sunday.
It's another story.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, we'll see you next week.
We will.
Enjoy
Bye-bye.
the football.
Bye.